Hello everyone and welcome. In front of you, you see the final version of the iPod that we are going to model and apply some simple texture and also apply a reflection on the floor for the earpieces and the iPod itself. So I did take 3 different renders. So I created 3 different JPEGs for the iPod at different angles, so you can have a better look on how the iPod looks like and what we are going to model. Let's go ahead and open up 3D Studio Max, and I already saved the file as iPod, and it will automatically add the extension .max, okay, since it's a 3D Studio Max file. So the way we're gonna do this is we're gonna start from a box shape. Okay, so under the Create tab, and then click on Geometry. Go ahead and click on box. Now I'll start that from the top view. So on the top view, as a matter of fact, no, I'll start that from the front view. So here in the front, I'll draw something like this. Okay, here it is. Now let's go ahead and select the shape. Okay, and then I'll click on Zoom Extends All. So what this does, again, it extends the shape or extends the box in all the 4 viewports. Okay, it automatically does that for all of them, so you don't have to use the zoom tool to go ahead and zoom in. Okay, so here's how the box looks from the top view, left view, and the front view. Now notice that only the perspective mode is in smooth highlight. The rest of them are in wireframe, right? So before we move on, I will go ahead and duplicate this box, and I'll tell you the difference and why we're duplicating this, just so you can see different techniques that we're going to use to build the body of the iPod. So I'll hold Shift down and then drag this on the x-axis. So now I have 2 boxes. Okay, now the clone options window will show up, and it's going to ask me, do you want to name this? And we're going to talk about the instance and the reference options in the future. So for now, I'm not going to name it. I'm just going to leave the default values that it picked up, and then I'll hit OK. So I have 2 boxes again. Now I'm going to select the box that is to the right, so the initial box that we created, and then I will go into the Modify tab. So click on the Modify tab, and under the parameters for the box, we have the length, width, height, and all of these. If you play around, here's the length, and then I'll undo, and here's the width, so you can change the width, and then here's the height. Okay, great. Now to get the smooth around the edges, so to get the edges a little smoother like this, and let's do a different angle. There you go. So when the light hits the edges of the iPod, then we have that roundness around them, and they're not as sharp edges as we can see from we see it in the box in here. So let's do first. Let's change the color. So I'll change the color for both of them to white. Okay. So now to get those smooth edges, we are going to add length of segments, and I'll tell you why in a second, and you'll see the difference. So I'll add 5 length of segments, and then I'll add 5 for the width, and maybe 3 for the height. Okay, the reason I want to add these is because when I turn my norms on, in order to get those smooth edges, we're going to use norms. So I'm going to convert both boxes into editable polygons. So here's an editable polygon. I'll select our box and convert that into an editable polygon. Now let me go ahead and turn the norms on for both of them. So I turned the norms on for the first box, and this is what it did to the box. I select the box that has the segments that we have in there, and this is what happens to the box. So the initial box that we created, it's a lot closer to what we want in comparison to the box that does not have the segments. Now when I turn off the norms, they both look the same. So here I'm going to select both of them, Okay, so they both look the same on the perspective view. If I were to maximize the perspective view, here's what I get. But again, if I turn norms on the box that does not have as many segments as the one we initially started with, then we can see the difference. Okay, now let's go back to the way it was. There you go. Now I'm going to go ahead and zoom in into the front view. And let's play around with the vertices that the box, this box has. This is the box that we're going to work with to create the body of the iPod. So in here, in order to get or select the vertices, we can simply hit this drop down in here and say select vertices. So now in here we can see all the vertices that we want to select and play around with them. Now what are those vertices? There you go. If I select only one vertice from the perspective, I can move that, and look what happened to the box. It created that bump on the box. You see that? So if I do a render of that, let's take a look at what happens in there. There's a render of that. So it put that bump because I moved that vertex to the right. I'm going to bring the window to the position that it was. Okay, here it is. So I'll go ahead and undo. But that's what the vertices does. They do to the box. So I'll come back to the front view. Now, what I'm going to do to get a more realistic view, or something closer to what we have in here, to this edge, I'm going to play around with these vertices and move them closer to the edge of the box. So I'll select the first. I drag the selection for this row of vertices. That's the second row. And then I'll hold Control down and select the row that is below. Okay, so again, both of them are selected. The way we know that they are selected is because they are in red. Now with the scale, select and uniform scale tool, I will go ahead and scale them on the y-axis. What this does, it moves the vertices away from each other or closer to each other. So I want to move them away from each other somewhere around there. Okay, same thing for the ones in the middle. So I drag the selection and I'm going to move them away from each other like so. Okay, and I'll do the same thing for the vertices that are in the vertical row or vertical format. So I'll hold Control down and then select those. Now these ones I will move with the x-axis. So I will move them away like that. Same thing for these ones in the middle. There it is. The reason I moved them away from each other, it's because when I turn my norms on now, so I'll come back here and I'll go in and turn the norms on, and I will also add the iteration so it will get a little smoother. And now this is exactly what we want. So if I come back here to the perspective view, and I will go ahead and rotate like that, and let me go ahead and do a render of that. There it is. So this looks a lot more the box that we like for the iPod, or the body of the iPod. Okay, so let's actually keep that one in. Okay, so now let's go ahead and build the monitor for the iPod. So we're going to build this black or the dark piece in here, and we're going to use that as a monitor. To do that, there's so many ways to do one thing. The way we're going to build that is by duplicating the iPod we just created. So I'll come back here, and we don't need the other box anymore. That was just to demonstrate what happens if you do not have as many segments when you turn your norms on. So here it is. Now I'll make a duplicate of the smooth box that we created. So I'll hold Shift down again, and I'll say okay. Now I can scale this so I can fit this inside the iPod, the body of the iPod, and I'll use this as the monitor. Make it a little smaller. Let me actually maximize that viewport, and let's say it will look something like like this. Okay, so now if I go ahead and change the color of that, so I'll make that black. Okay, now I'll go ahead and move that just a little bit so we can see that on the perspective view, and I'll do that from the left side. I'll move that a little bit to the right, like so. And now when I go ahead and do a render, so I'll maximize the window. So here's the monitor. Simple as that. So again, what I did, I made a duplicate of the box for the iPod, and I scaled that down so I can fit that inside the body.